Welcome to Nashville.con, as in con artist. We take a look at con artists in the entertainment industry because when we use that example, it really helps us understand other personality dynamics and say a real family. And when you're on the bus, you kind of are a bus family. So it's a really good kind of petri dish to be able to look at various personality types. And in particular, I believe the tour works well to make money in the music industry, but it doesn't work well as a family because only love can grow on equal ground. We're going to learn about public image versus true identity. We're going to learn about egos, big egos, and yes, people, the adoring fans that worship them. We're going to look at, in other words, narcissists and codependence, because who you are on stage is an act, who you are at home is a fact. So today I have Larry Guthrie, my father, here today. We had him on. He wears his. Show him a little trick about keeping your glasses. Turn around, can you? He wears his glasses on the back of his head, and he never loses them. A little tip for anybody to not lose your glasses. His eyes in the back of his head. So we're talking about: do you ride the bus or are you thrown under the bus? And I think if you live past 35, you're going to be sometimes riding the bus in life and sometimes thrown under the bus. I think in job situations, you've probably been thrown under the bus a few times.
Many times. Yep.
And, we sing songs about country music and sometimes about country, God, and Jesus and guns. And then behind the curtain, after we just sing about Jesus, every once in a while you heard the person that just sang about Jesus say something that really doesn't sound like anything Jesus would have anything to do with. One of the instances that really bothered me is we were singing a country song that was words about Jesus, and everyone would come and say that song blessed me and thank you so much, and will you sign this for me, and Bible verses and whatnot. We get on the tour bus, and when our pizzas came afterwards on the tour bus, Dad, the cursing that was spoken by the person that just sang about Jesus, it was the little guy delivering the pizza said, I'd really like the star's autograph. And the star realized that he brought the wrong pizza. And instead of giving the autograph, he wrote, where's my blankety blank pizza? And it was something that really hurt me. So I'll say, in life, in every job, not just the entertainment industry, you have hypocrisy. A lot of times when there's continual domination or disrespect, and a person has to endure it over and over, what we would call a sideman or a stagehand. Stagehands get yelled at all the time, and lighting guys really bothers me. I think that you should treat the service people or people that are helping you the best, the sound engineers, and and then the band gets yelled at too. There's usually a hierarchy of who gets screamed at the first. And so when people can tolerate that for so long. And then when they become a whipping post, you can develop things called PTSD, something that I was diagnosed with, which is post-traumatic stress syndrome. Sometimes when you feel trapped, not heard, devalued, but it's not because I wasn't the star. I loved being a side person and singing harmony. I'm really good at making people's songs, putting the sauce on it to make it sound kind of good. So I'm proud of doing that. So many times I really was grateful that I was standing on the side and not up front where there was a little bit more pressure on me. Some of those artists will stand out at autograph lines in the sun for hours sweating. I mean, and I got to go back to the hotel, Dad, and they had to stand there and sign autographs. So we can't really say that we could do it any better than the artists when we have not stood in their shoes, for sure. But talking about this hidden abuse that goes on behind the curtain, it can develop 1 minute saying, oh, thank you, you did such a great job, and the next minute beating you up and making you feel worthless or ignoring you altogether, which is the worst form of abuse. We've always heard that words wound, and if you think my dad and I haven't exchanged some serious words, we have, haven't we?
Absolutely.
And there are times where we don't see eye to eye and we butt heads. But somehow Dad and I always seem to forgive and come back and whatnot. And we've had to learn, even through religious beliefs, political parties, we've had to learn to love each other even though we disagree, right? Hasn't been always easy. Some days it's not easy, right?
Some days it's not, no.
I know I'm just an angel to live with, right?
Right.
There's the first lesson when you're with a woman. You always say, you don't look fat in those pants, and right?
Right.
There's advice from an 86-year-old man. So, but what we want to bring up is things like narcissist, or sometimes the person with the big ego, and then the side people or the stagehands, or sometimes the musicians. Sometimes the narcissists are the musicians. I've dated and married those people. Sometimes in my life, here in Nashville, I married 2 different individuals, and went through some pain of feeling like I had to shine less so that they could shine more, and they worked really hard on kind of neglecting me or putting me in the background, and so that was painful. So, we have also, you think about churches, there's the celebrity pastor who's the star. Ironically, in Nashville, a lot of those people were people that wanted to be stars and end up becoming preachers. So, you have politicians that can have these narcissistic tendencies. But all that to say is, when we throw somebody under the bus, it can cause them to have post-traumatic stress when they've been taken for granted, taken advantage of. Dad, you remember me talking about a tour I was on? And at first I didn't like the racist things and jokes that were being said. I have Black Americans. I say Black Americans because a dear friend of mine keeps telling me I'm not African, but quit calling me African American. So Black American, from my friend I adore. I heard just one particular tour, some really hateful jokes that I didn't appreciate because my youth pastor growing up was a Black American, biggest influence in my life. So I went to the bus driver, knocked on the bus and said, "You have to help me. I didn't sign on to play fiddle to tolerate this kind of hatred. It really is hurtful to me." And instantly that person said, "I got your back, sweetheart. Don't worry." It turned right, Dad, from racism to extreme sexism. And I would be told about this person's jokes he had the night before. I remember calling home, talking to my parents, really upset about it, and realizing I didn't have any other job to go to, and I had to kind of tolerate it. The longer you tolerate being disrespected, the more chances you have of developing things like post-traumatic stress. Darren, who plays music with me, told me that post-traumatic stress he heard was having to be strong way too long. So I had to stand up to this person who kept coming on to me, and then pretty soon pulled the buses over and said, "Get your stuff, you're riding alone on my bus." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm going to ride on the band bus and get back to Nashville on the band bus." And his response to me was, "Honey, on the road I'm God." And so I had what felt like a panic attack, struggled to breathe, and all I thought was the Constitution and our rights. I said, "Does taxes come out of my paycheck?" And he said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Well, get off this bus and call your attorney, because if I don't get back on the bus with the band, I'll see you in court." So that was a painful thing for me. I'd like you, Dad, to maybe talk about my mother, who was a music teacher, taught me music in the 70s? What time? 70, I don't know.
Early 70s, yeah.
What did she go through? Sometimes when somebody envies you or is jealous, man, behind everything seems envy, Dad. It seems like and I know you've had people envy you in your life. So tell everyone what happened when a choir director started to envy my mother. First, tell where she taught music.
She taught music at Clackamas School in Clackamas, Oregon. And it wasn't always easy for her because she was a woman first, and that's a big bundle to have to put up with.
Back in the 70s,
people,
right?
In the 70s, yeah. Mm-hmm. And but she's hung in there, and she done very well in music. She taught a lot of the instruments herself.
She taught recorder class, orchestra, and band. And when we say it was hard because she was a woman, it wasn't that a woman does less than a man could do. It was in the 70s, and it was where? At a religious institution, a Christian school.
Yeah.
And what happened? How was she disrespected as far as being a woman with a lot of men? How do you feel she was disrespected as a woman at a Christian school?
Well, by their actions and the way they tried to put her down a little bit to keep themselves elevated, and it was hard for her to try to be the best she can, and yet have some men look as if she was bragging and trying to do other things. But she had a hard time because she was good at what she did. She was a very good music teacher, and it was rough. It was hard for her, even in a Christian school. You had the same kind of cruelty going on with a lot of women right now.
Dad, do you think back in the 70s, women were really taught that they should be kind of under men, and not physically under men, but that men were the king and the woman was the servant, and mom really had to be under constant male authority or she didn't measure up? Is that what you feel?
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. She had to make sure she didn't make other men look less, or even compete if she was good at something. And some people are all different. Somebody's good at one thing and someone's good at another, but to share that kind of stuff is hard to do for a lady or a woman or a musician that's a woman, because they just don't think she should be on that level.
And we talk about on this program about egos and the stars that worship them, or in other words, narcissists and codependents. Mom was codependent because she needed a job. Mm-hmm. The narcissist was the one calling the shots, and if the minute that my mother would displease them, or they felt that she really didn't have an equal standing at all with men, and so she had to walk a fine line. But in the end, the reason that we get thrown under the bus, I'm going to say it usually has to do with one word, Dad: envy. Mm-hmm. Was there somebody that envied my mother? I know if you've ever watched the movie Music of the Heart with Meryl Streep, where she they were going to cancel the music program back then, and my mom saved the music program by selling something my dad sold. What did everyone sell to buy their instruments? You remember?
What?
Remember what truck you were driving, and all the kids were selling what?
Oh, lunch meat, all kinds
beef
of
jerky
and snack items, and
yes,
pizzas, and I carried the Oscar Mayer full line of lunch meats.
My dad drove an Oscar Mayer truck. It was the coolest for a kid, because
Yeah.
everybody'd want to come in the back of my dad's refrigerated truck in the summer, and we'd have little snacks.
Yeah.
But my mother found a way, since they were going to cancel the music program, to allow them to let the kids sell beef jerky and pepperoni at school to buy their own instruments to save the music program. Mm-hmm. Remember? Mm-hmm. And what happened when those kids bought their own instruments? They really practiced. What happened at the competitions they went to? When Mom's band would play up against these big schools, what was the results? You remember?
Well, it was hard for her to do that, but she competed. In fact, she really was very, very good at it, and other men that was in that area didn't like it too well. It was very hard for her to step into that position as a woman at that time, and
she felt a lot of discrimination.
A lot of discrimination, you bet. And in those days there was, and it was very, very hard. She had to try to be over a big class of kids, and that's hard enough without having to put up with discrimination from men and stuff like that. So yeah, it was very hard. She done a good job of it, and to this day I can look back and very proud of what she did.
We to this day on Facebook, and this is going to go out to North Clackamas Christian friends that are still my friend to this day. I have the Hudson family that visits, that my mother taught their kids music, and we have close friends. Mom touched a lot of lives and made a difference. But in those competitions, a little tiny Christian school was on the map and competed against big schools and won a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Now, when somebody wins or somebody achieves something, there's always going to be, you don't think people are going to be happy for you, right? No. I remember when you lived in poverty, you had a lot of friends, but what happened when you bought a farm?
Well, it got different completely. Once I had a farm, then I was looked at as if I didn't deserve it, and or shouldn't be there. But you know what? When you work hard at something, you can do anything you want to do. And
how do you block out the noise of the envious people?
It's very hard, because you don't want to lose friends, and yet yet some people you think are your friend or that is happy for what you're doing is not. They're just not. It's we have that in this society a lot right now, and
So, back to the on the bus or thrown under the bus. Who threw my mother? You don't have to say names because we don't use slander people here. But there was a particular choir director that got a choir director noticed that the band was getting a whole lot of attention.
yeah.
And what did they contrive? Don't use any names, but what did they contrive? What kind of scheme did she contrive of? And looking into my mother's past to try to get her out of there. What did she do?
Well, she had to put up with several things, and
What did she find out about Mom's background that was considered a sin?
divorce, one thing, and no matter what circumstances, it was always the woman's fault and not the man's. And then the past incidences of things like that was very hard to overcome for a woman, let alone the normal things. But
So she found out that she dug into my mother's past and found out that my mother had been divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the 70s, that was a huge sin. You weren't worthy.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the words were, she didn't belong teaching children. And I remember the first Taco Bells back then opening up, and dating myself. But my mother would take kids with problems. She'd take them for lunch. You can't do that now, but she used to be able to get permission. She'd go buy their lunch and find out how she could help. So she invested so much. And I remember what you call deacons or the school board found out from the choir director she had been divorced, and what did they do?
well, they tried to have her kicked out of the school and broke her heart. But but people sometimes you don't understand why they have to do things like that. It was just broke her heart, and
And you know what? Here's a positive at the end of it. My mom, I believe, experienced some PTSD from. She drove the school bus, plus was the band teacher, orchestra teacher, recorder class, and invested all her love and time and energy into these children, and then was told, "You don't measure up. You are a sinful woman because you were divorced." And the men here have all ruled that that you need to be out. And after all the love and things she gave, and them selling beef jerky, would you say that she suffered from PTSD from that kind of discrimination and abuse?
oh, absolutely, very much so.
What kind of symptoms was she? Was she maybe? I remember her being in bed, just very sad and depressed for a while.
Yeah, and she cried about it when she didn't want her children to see her do that. She wanted to be strong and not have to show her pain, and she did a good job of it. But
Now let me ask you, in your opinion, Dad, you remember that happened in the 70s in Oregon. There's people have, sometimes in the South, and I will say I love the South, I love country music. When I leave here, I feel like I want to come back because I miss the talkativeness and how someone on the street will talk to you and the hospitality. There's good things and bad things about every area. One of the things that I love the hospitality, and I love country music, and I love the people, but they're slow to change. And when it talks about changing, being racist or sexist or ways that we take one person and make them above another person, I think your daughter is kind of experiencing some of what Mom went through back then. We even had some people from the Christian school that came to visit recently, and when I told them what I was going through, you remember, they said, "That's what your mother went through." I've dealt with people getting a little envious of some things that I have been and done, and wanted to keep me under the man and under the male authority where I couldn't shine and I couldn't have a voice. Sometimes I feel, we think about Dukes of Hazzard. Sometimes there's areas that remind me of Boss Hog Town, where the local church is in bed with the courthouse, is in bed with the country music industry. And have you sensed that a little bit?
oh yeah, quite a bit.
And how would you say that you've sensed it, Dad? You've experienced certain things different than how they were in Oregon? How would you say?
Here in the South, there's a type of love I see, and there's a type of cruelty I see, and some people. And again, I still see problems with the some people have with the black race, which I think is ridiculous. But and also for women, if they excel in certain things and they're somewhat better than men, they have to pay a price for that, and it's very costly. It's very hard.
Yeah, I'm experiencing some PTSD from the kind of the good old boy network that we experienced in the 70s in Oregon, that's still very active now in the South. One of those things I'll tell you that's interesting, and this is not a bashing of the South, this is my home now. When I go to visit Oregon, I want to get back home to Nashville because I don't like all that rain. You know, I love how people just start a conversation on the street. There's things I adore about the South. The hospitality, it's a lot more warm. But some of those old school mentality things are still there, I believe, in the churches. Certainly in the older artists on the road. The newer artists don't have any problem with the racism thing. But I want to finish the story with this, Dad. I want to finish with telling you how that tour bus situation turned out.
Good.
I have a dear friend, and I won't use his name because I didn't ask permission. Wonderful black American, and I hate that because we're all Americans. We don't say I'm a white American, but just to let you know, he's black, and amazing, talented human being. Amazing dancer, and I love to dance. I saw him out, and when he's out on the dance floor, man, it's art. So amazing writer, singer, dancer. And I will tell you, when I experienced severe sexism and racism, asking if I was an N lover on the tour bus, having black dolls hung by their necks in my bunk, some pretty serious things. On the way back, when I convinced him I'm riding back on this bus, it made me so angry, the jokes that they were telling, Dad. You know, horrible jokes about African Americans or black Americans, whichever you prefer, that it broke my heart because my black youth pastor and my black almost best friend, I would say, that I've known for 20 years, I love so much. And so I called and said, I need you to meet me at the bus and I need you to do something. And he's like, what, Strawberry? He's called me Strawberry forever. And I said, I'll explain it later. I want you to pick me up at the bus, come on the bus, and say, are you ready to go, honey? Bend me over and give me the deepest kiss you could ever give me. And he said, I'll be right there. And finally, he showed up, and all these kind of very racist, what I feel were drunks, saw this football trainer with these big, handsome guy with these big, muscly arms come on the bus and say, hey, you ready to go, honey? Gave me a big kiss, and you should have seen the look on their face. What does he have that I don't have? And I will tell you, he has a heart. That person that I'm referring to, he could never be that hateful to someone else. He sees people as equals, and I would much rather date somebody like him than somebody hateful. And I don't see color. I see loving human beings, and we all bleed red. So that was my experience. I think that was my little dig of, you know, I'd date him way before you. We got in the car, and he said, okay, Strawberry, you've never asked me to kiss you. Why'd you do that? And I said, because there was racism on the bus, and I didn't like it. It hurt my heart, and there's also some things I'm going through. So all that to say, sometimes you ride on the bus, Dad, and sometimes you're thrown under the bus.
Right. You got to be able to handle that situation. And I've done that pretty well in my life, but I've never outwardly tried to hurt a black person or a Mexican person or any other race. As far as I'm concerned, they're just as beautiful as any white person could be.
Yep.
So I'm not...
We've got some good friends. My dad, kind of, when he came to the South, he got a little bit of hassle over why he wasn't kind of sitting at the white table at the gym. And my dad purposely made sure he sat with his buddies that were African American and black American.
Which was at the table with 3 other black people and 1 other white person and me. That was our table, and I was very proud of it. They were very good friends, and even today I talk to them on my phone, even though we're 75 miles away. And I haven't seen them for a while, but they text me once in a while, and they're still very good friends, and I miss them a lot because they were very good to me, and they're just beautiful people.
I say we call them, hi Willie, hi, right? So I I want you to know, if you're going through abuse, sexism, racism, discrimination, you're not alone. We all go through it. Now, I don't know what the experience would be like to go through discrimination as a Black American, but I'm sure I can find people with some great stories that might be on my show and help us understand. It's not okay with me if you've been hurt. I hear you, you have a voice, so use it. Write to me at Nashville.con, C-O-N, @gmail.com, and tell us your stories so we can all learn and grow. Thank you. Thanks, Dad.
Thanks. Thank you.